The morning air was a cool, gray whisper against Minjun's skin, carrying the scent of damp earth and meticulously tended roses. The cemetery was his sanctuary, a place of silent, ordered grief, where the chaos of his world could not touch him. Here, he was not the chairman, the boss, the unyielding force of Seoul's shadowed underworld. He was just a father. He walked the familiar stone path, his polished leather shoes making no sound on the manicured grass. In his hand, he held a single white lily, its petals as pure and fragile as the memory of the daughter he came to visit. Hannah's grave was on a gentle slope, overlooking a small, weeping willow, its branches a constant, green curtain of sorrow. It was a place of profound peace and equally profound emptiness. But as he approached, the perfect stillness of the scene was broken. A figure was already there, kneeling before the simple marble headstone. It was a woman, her back to him, her shoulders trembling with quiet sobs. He stopped, his hand tightening on the stem of the lily. A cold wave of possessive anger washed over him. This was his place, his grief. Who was this intruder, daring to shed her tears on his sacred ground? He noted her attire with a detached, analytical coldness, a crisp white shirt, a simple red vest, and long black trousers. A uniform. She was a waitress or something of the sort. A stranger. He felt a surge of irrational fury. What right did she have to mourn a girl she could never have known? His world was built on control, on understanding every variable, and this woman was an anomaly he could not tolerate. He started forward, his steps now deliberate, his shadows stretching long and dark in the early light, preparing to fall over her and reclaim his solitude. He reached the grave, his presence an immediate and palpable weight in the quiet air. The woman flinched as his shadow eclipsed the soft morning sun, her sobbing catching in her throat. She looked up, her eyes wide and startled, glistening with tears that traced paths down her dark cheeks. She was younger than he'd first thought, perhaps in her late 20s, her face open and expressive even in its grief. For a moment, they just stared at each other, a silent tableau of intrusion and sorrow. Minjun's expression was a mask of cold inquiry, his jaw tight. He was a man accustomed to people shrinking from his gaze, but she held it, a flicker of fear quickly replaced by a profound sadness that seemed to echo his own. "Who are you?" he asked. His voice was low, not loud, but it carried the chilling authority of a man who rarely had to ask for anything twice. It was a demand, not a question. The woman slowly rose to her feet, brushing the damp grass from her knees. She wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand, a gesture of such simple, human vulnerability that it briefly chipped at his anger. "My name is Lena," she said, her voice soft but not weak. I didn't mean to intrude. I just come to say thank you." Minjun's brow furrowed. The answer made no sense. "Thank you? For what?" "You did not know my daughter." His words were clipped, accusatory. He wanted her gone. He wanted this sanitized, to return the morning to its predictable, painful ritual. Lena took a shallow breath, her gaze dropping to the name carved into the marble stone, Hannah Kim. Beloved daughter. "No, I never met her," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "But she saved my life." Minjun felt the world tilt on its axis. The words hung in the air between them, incomprehensible and yet devastatingly clear. He stared at her, his mind struggling to connect her statement to any logical reality. His anger, so solid and grounding just a moment ago, dissolved into a bewildering fog. "What are you talking about?" he managed to say, the command in his voice gone, replaced by a raw, desperate confusion. Lena's hand instinctively went to her chest, resting just over her heart. The gesture was unconscious, protective, and it was the key that unlocked everything. "Your daughter, Hannah," she began, her voice thick with emotion. "She was an organ donor. I was on the transplant list for a very long time. I was dying." She looked from him to the headstone and back again, her eyes pleading for understanding. "I received her heart." The confession landed with the force of a physical blow. Minjun stumbled back a step, his meticulously controlled world shattering into a million pieces. Hannah's heart, the heart he had heard beating through a monitor until its final, fading rhythm. the heart of the only person he had ever truly, unconditionally loved. It was here, beating inside this stranger, this waitress who cried at his daughter's grave. He looked at her, truly looked at her, and saw not an intruder, but a vessel of a miracle he hadn't known existed. His gaze fell to her chest, to the spot where her hand rested, and he imagined it. The steady, life-giving pulse. A part of Hannah, still in the world, still alive. "How did you find this place?" he asked, his voice a hoarse whisper. "The letters," she explained, "from the donation agency. They're anonymous, of course. But they gave me her age, the date enough. I wanted to know who she was. The girl who gave me a second chance. I wanted to thank her. I wanted her family to know that her gift was the most precious thing in the world." He found himself gesturing to the small stone bench beside the willow tree, an invitation he hadn't consciously decided to make. She sat, and after a moment's hesitation, he sat beside her, leaving a careful distance between them. The lily lay forgotten on the grass. For a long time, there was only the sound of the wind sighing through the willow's branches. "Tell me about it," he said finally, the words feeling foreign in his mouth. He was a man who took information, who interrogated, but this was different. This was a plea. Lena began to speak, her story unfolding in the quiet morning air. She spoke of years of weakness, of a childhood spent watching other children run and play from a window. She described the constant hum of machines, the sterile smell of hospitals, the crushing weight of waiting for a call that might never come. She worked at a fine dining restaurant downtown, saving what little she could, her dreams of opening a small bakery seeming more like a fantasy with each passing day. "I was so tired," she confessed, her gaze distant. "Tired of fighting, tired of hoping. The day I got the call, I almost didn't believe it. There was so much fear, but underneath it all, there was this tiny spark. The thought that maybe I'd get to live." She described the surgery, the painful recovery, and the first moment she woke up and felt it, a strong, steady beat in her chest, a rhythm of life so powerful it felt like a song. She spoke of the overwhelming gratitude that had become the foundation of her new life, a gratitude so immense it felt like a debt she could never repay. As he listened, Minjun saw his daughter's final act not as an abstract good deed, but as a tangible, breathing reality. Hannah had always been kind, her empathy a stark contrast to his own hardened nature. She had chosen to be a donor herself, a decision he had signed off on in a haze of grief, never imagining its true impact. He was seeing his daughter's legacy, not in the corporate empires he built, but in the life of this humble, grateful woman. The sun had climbed higher, its rays filtering through the willow leaves, dappling the ground in shifting patterns of light and shadow. The initial tension between them had evaporated, replaced by a fragile, shared understanding. A bond forged in the space between life and death. Minjun finally broke the silence, his voice softer than Lena had ever heard it. "She loved the smell of rain on hot pavement," he said, the memory surfacing, clear and sharp. "She called it petrichor, taught me the word. She would stand on the balcony with her eyes closed, just breathing it in. It was a small, simple detail, but it was a piece of his Hannah that he had never shared with anyone in his world. It was a crack in the armor, a glimpse of the father beneath the fearsome chairman." Lena's expression softened into a genuine, beautiful smile. It transformed her face, chasing away the last vestiges of sorrow. "I love that, too," she said warmly. "When I was sick, I couldn't go outside when it rained. The damp air was bad for my breathing. Now I can stand in it for hours. I feel every drop. It feels like a gift." The connection between them solidified in that small, shared joy. He looked at the perfect, expensive lily he had brought, lying on the grass. Then he looked at the small, humble bouquet of wildflowers, daisies and clover, that Lena had placed at the base of the headstone. He stood, picked up his lily, and gently laid it right beside her flowers. The pristine white bloom and the simple country blossoms sat together, two different worlds, two different expressions of love, united in their purpose. He turned back to her. "Your shift must be starting soon," he stated, a hint of his old directness returning, but tempered now with something new. "Care. I can give you a ride." Lena looked surprised. hesitant to accept a kindness from this intimidating, powerful man. "You don't have to do that. I insist," he said, and this time it was not an order. It was a request. That morning became the first of many. Every Tuesday, at the first light of dawn, they would find each other at Hannah's grave. It became their ritual, a silent appointment kept without words. He would bring a single lily, and she would bring a small, changing assortment of wildflowers. They would sit on the bench and talk. The conversation started with Hannah. Lena would ask about her, and Minjun, to his own surprise, would answer. He told her about Hannah's terrible singing voice, but her incredible talent for painting, about her fierce loyalty to her friends, about the way she could diffuse his anger with a single, well-timed joke. In sharing these memories, he felt his daughter come alive again, not as a painful ghost, but as a vibrant presence. In turn, he learned about Lena. He learned about her dream of a bakery that would sell cronets and classic Southern biscuits, a fusion of her creativity and her heritage. He learned about the younger brother she was helping put through college, about her love for old jazz music, about the quiet strength that had carried her through years of illness. He began to see the world through her eyes, a world filled not with threats and transactions, but with small kindnesses and profound gratitude. The rides from the cemetery became coffee, then breakfast. He found himself rearranging his formidable schedule to accommodate these meetings. He started sending his driver to pick her up from her late shifts at the restaurant, a gesture of protection that was both practical and deeply personal. One evening, he didn't send his driver. He came himself, waiting in his sleek black car until she emerged, looking tired but smiling when she saw him. "I thought we could have dinner," he said, his voice betraying a hint of nervousness he hadn't felt in decades. "Somewhere you don't have to serve anyone that night." Sitting across from her in a quiet, secluded restaurant, they talked about the future for the first time. They laughed. And Minjun felt a warmth spread through his chest, a feeling he had long thought buried with his daughter. It was a different kind of love. Quieter, more mature, but just as powerful. It was the steady, rhythmic beat of a new beginning. Minjun was not a fool. He understood the dark and dangerous world he commanded, a world of loyalty and betrayal, where weakness was a death sentence. To bring Lena into it felt like an act of profound selfishness. She was pure, a beacon of light and goodness, and his life was a labyrinth of shadows. He wrestled with this conflict internally, the protective instinct of a father warring with the burgeoning love of a man who had found a reason to live again. His lieutenants, men who had followed him for years, were wary of her. They saw her as a potential vulnerability, an unknown element in their carefully controlled equation. At a meeting, one of his senior captains, a man named Choi, referred to Lena dismissively as the waitress. Minjun's reaction was immediate and glacial. The room fell silent as he rose slowly from his chair. "Her name is Lena," he said, his voice dangerously soft. "She is to be shown the same respect you show me. She is to be protected with your lives. Anyone who fails in this, or causes her a moment of distress, will answer to me directly. Is that understood?" The message was unequivocal. Lena was untouchable. The incident, which he later recounted to her, both reassured and frightened her. She was not naive. She had pieced together the nature of his business from news reports and the deference with which everyone treated him. She knew the risks. One evening, in the quiet comfort of his penthouse apartment overlooking the glittering city, she confronted the issue head-on. "Minjun," she said, her voice serious as she turned to face him. "We need to talk about who you are." All of it. He told her everything, not sparing the ugly details of his past, the violence and ruthlessness that had cemented his power. He laid his world bare before her, expecting her to run. But Lena listened with an unnerving calm. When he was finished, she took his hand. "I see the man who brings flowers to his daughter's grave every week," she said softly. "I see the man who listens to my dreams about a bakery. I am not in love with your business. I am in love with you. I know there is darkness, but I have seen your light, and I am not afraid of the dark." A year to the day after they first met, they stood before Hannah's grave. The air was crisp with the promise of autumn, and the willow tree had begun to shed its leaves in a slow, golden cascade. He had brought his lily, she her wildflowers. For several minutes, they stood in comfortable silence, their ritual now imbued with a year of shared history, of breakfasts and late-night talks, of laughter and healing. Minjun turned to face her, his heart pounding with a nervous energy he hadn't felt since he was a young man. He took both of her hands in his, their warmth a familiar comfort. "Lena," he began, his voice thick with an emotion he no longer tried to hide. "A year ago, I came to this place and my world was gray. It was empty. All I had was memory and regret. And then I found you here, crying for a girl you never knew." He paused, his gaze dropping to her chest. "My daughter's last act on this earth was one of incredible generosity. I thought her gift was only for you, a second chance at life. But I was wrong. Her gift was for me, too. She gave you her heart, and in doing so, you brought mine back to life. You taught me how to feel again." He slowly sank to one knee on the soft grass, pulling a small, velvet box from his pocket. He opened it to reveal a simple, elegant diamond ring. Lena's hands flew to her mouth, her eyes welling with tears. But this time, they were tears of joy. "I know my world is complicated," he said, his voice earnest and raw. "But I promise to spend the rest of my life building a place of peace for you, for us. I promise to protect you and to love you with everything I am. Lena, you have my heart in every way that matters. Will you marry me?" Through her tears, she nodded, a choked sob of happiness escaping her. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Minyon." "Yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit, and rose to pull her into his arms, a full-circle moment of profound, redemptive love, witnessed only by the quiet grace of his daughter's memory. Their wedding was not the grand, ostentatious affair his position would have dictated. There were no powerful figures or shadowy associates. Instead, it was held in a secluded botanical garden, attended by only a handful of people: Lena's brother, her closest friend, and Minjun's most trusted and loyal right-hand man, who stood as his witness. The ceremony was simple, held under a canopy of blooming wisteria as the late afternoon sun cast a warm, golden glow over everything. Minjun, dressed in a sharp, tailored suit, looked younger, the harsh lines of his face softened by a quiet, pervasive joy. Lena was radiant in a simple, elegant cream-colored dress, her smile a beacon of pure happiness. They exchanged vows they had written themselves, words of profound love, gratitude, and promises for a shared future. It was a sacred moment, a new beginning built on a foundation of grief and hope. Their new life began to take shape, a gentle rhythm replacing the chaos of their pasts. Minjun, true to his word, helped her secure the perfect location for her bakery, a sunny corner shop she named Hannah's Hearth. He wasn't just a silent investor. He was there, tasting recipes, offering opinions on decor, his presence a quiet, steady support. The bakery flourished, becoming a beloved neighborhood spot known for its delicious pastries and the warm, welcoming smile of its owner. For his part, Minjun began a slow but deliberate pivot. He started channeling his vast resources into more legitimate enterprises, delegating the darker aspects of his operations to his most trusted lieutenants with strict new codes of conduct. He was still a powerful man, but the nature of that power was changing. He was building a legacy not of fear, but of stability, one that Lena could be a part of without reservation. Their home became a sanctuary, filled with the scent of baking bread, the sound of old jazz records, and the quiet comfort of two people who had found their other half in the most unexpected of circumstances. 2 years after they first met, they returned to the cemetery. It was a beautiful autumn morning, the air clean and bright. They walked the familiar path hand in hand, their steps in perfect sync. The grave was, as always, immaculate. This time, they brought a large, single arrangement of white lilies and vibrant wildflowers, intertwined. They were not here to mourn a separation, but to celebrate a connection. They stood before the headstone, their shared silence no longer heavy with sorrow, but filled with a deep and abiding peace. Minjun looked at Lena, at the love and light in her eyes, and felt a wave of gratitude so powerful it almost brought him to his knees. He had spent the first year after Hannah's death encased in a cold, impenetrable shell of grief, believing his life was effectively over. He saw his power and wealth as meaningless trinkets, unable to save the one person who mattered. He had thought strength was about control, about projecting an unbreachable facade. Lena had shown him the truth. She had taught him that true strength lay in vulnerability, in the courage to open a broken heart to the possibility of healing. She had shown him that love was not a weakness to be guarded against, but the most powerful, redemptive force in the universe. He gently placed his hand over her chest, feeling the strong, steady beat beneath his palm. Hannah's heart, Lena's life, his salvation. He then placed his other hand over his own heart, feeling its rhythm, a rhythm he had once thought silenced forever. He looked from Lena to the name on the stone. "Thank you, my daughter," he whispered, the words carried away on the gentle breeze. He had come to this place seeking solitude in his endless grief, only to find connection. He had thought his daughter's story had ended here, beneath this cold marble. But he was wrong. It was not an ending. It was a tragic, beautiful, and miraculous beginning. Her final gift hadn't just saved a life. It had redeemed one. It had saved his.